Hello everyone and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we are going to be reviewing Eternals, which is the brand new Marvel movie that is touted to be the Marvel epic in all of the marketing for this film. It's directed by Chloe Zhao, starring an incredible cast of amazing actors. Too much to name right off here at the beginning here, but I will be getting into all the characters, the whole story, everything about this movie in spoiler fashion. So if you guys have not seen Eternals yet and you want to see Eternals, definitely go check it out. If you're a fan of the Marvel movies, I think it's a different take on the Marvel film, especially because of Chloe Zhao's personal stamp on this movie, although it does still have all the Marvelisms that you've come to know from all these films. And overall, before I get into spoilers, I will say it is a recommend from me, but this is one of the probably lesser Marvel movies. I would have to say I'm a little bit mixed on some things about this film. So let's just jump right into it and explain all the things that I loved about this movie and all the things that I wasn't so crazy about. So what is Eternals about? That's been the question that everybody has had about this movie ever since its announcement from Marvel and Disney. And it's essentially about this group of 10 characters who are Eternals. They were created by the Celestials to protect Earth, not from all the normal dangers that, normal humans would have to face on a daily basis, but to protect them from these creatures called the Deviants, which were also, you find out, were created by the Celestials in this, forever war to kind of build up humanity to a point where they can, bring the creation of a new Celestial. And so that is the big, I guess, spoilery premise of what the Eternals are. And I'll start off this video with what I loved about this movie, and that is what I love about this movie. This whole storyline of how these Eternals were created by the Celestials and all this world building that this movie does is really, really solid, and I really like all of that. But what I love most about, this idea of them being created in this way to be able to, create more Eternal or more Celestials is the fact that philosophical debates that they have are the most interesting aspects of this film. That idea of, nature versus nurture. You have these eternal characters who live forever and they've, had so many different lives, all these different memories that they don't remember anymore, all these different times where they went to different planets and helped essentially grow them and groom them up until, their destruction essentially. That whole idea and that philosophy, once they figure that out, once they figure out the truth of what they are actually doing, they kind of split into two different groups. One group of people who think that the benefits of creating Celestials to create more planets, to create billions of more lives, is worth it over the destruction of one singular planet. Some people believe in that philosophy, but most of them believe in the fact that they have come to love this Earth and they have come to love the people of this planet, and they've come to love humanity so much, especially with Sersi's character. You have all this stuff and those different philosophies, kind of battling throughout this movie, and that is what I really loved about this film. They even do dive into some philosophical debates of whether or not their interference in humanity is kind of driving humanity in a way that is positive or negative. You have the DRUIG character who, he really has the power to stop all war and all, negative aspects of humanity, but that would take away, their humanity in general. But his character is so interesting to me because that philosophical debate and that moral dilemma that he has as a person, because he can stop all of it with just a thought in his mind. But should he? And I love when they give these heroes, this is the first time you have heroes in the Marvel Universe that are essentially gods. These are characters that have so much power where they can stop so many things so easily, I guess to them so easily, yet they don't and they can't because of different reasons and because of different moralities that they have. And so that aspect of this film I thought was great. And so let's go character by character. First up, we have Gemma Chan as Sersi, and I will say she is kind of the protagonist of this film. She's the main character of this film, even though it's a giant ensemble cast. She's definitely the character that you follow the most throughout this entire movie, and I loved her character. This is the second time she's actually been in a Marvel movie. She was, a side character in Captain Marvel, but I'm glad she has a chance to really shine in this role because she's a very, very talented actress, and I really liked her character in this movie. She does go through, the basic hero's journey of, not knowing if she has that power or has that, morality and that, power within her to do the better thing, to do the greater good. And that storyline that she has, that arc that she has, is fulfilled in this movie. And I think that's another thing I appreciate about this film, is it feels like an individual film. Yes, it's part of the greater Marvel universe, and yes, they mention things like Thanos and the snap and the blip and all those different things, but it has a complete story within itself. Not even just yes, there's 5 minutes at the end where it kind of sets up for sequels, but for the most part, it's a complete story. And Sersi's story in this movie is complete with her arc in this singular film. And she's the one kind of leading that philosophy of, we have this love for the humanity. She fell in love with a human, character in this movie played by Kit Harington, who is eventually going to play a character called the Black Knight. I don't know nearly enough about that character to kind of dive into, the after credit scene and all of that. So if you guys have information of this character, I know that he has some sort of supernatural connection, this familial history with this, sword that they use in battle, this expert swordsman thing, and he's like the third in a line of, a family of generations of all these things, and he's talking about his complicated family history that he kept a secret from Sersi's character. And so I think that relationship and that, dynamic that those two characters had at the beginning of this movie, because you only see them really at the beginning of the movie and at the end of the movie together, and I really like their dynamic. So I'm really interested to see where that goes moving forward. But when you have Gemma Chan's character, falling in love with the human character and loving humanity, you have the complete opposite of that, which is played by Richard Madden, who is Ikaris in this movie. And yes, Ikaris does fly too close to the sun in this one. And he was, again, another really fascinating character in this film, because not a single character in this movie is, or I guess when you have the villain characters of this movie, besides the deviants, I guess they're kind of a more weaker type of villain. But Ikaris, as kind of, you find out being a more villainous character in this movie, he's not just, cornered to one sort of type of character. He's not just a villain character. Yes, he does some terrible things, and yes, he does kill Salma Hayek's character, who kind of, kicks off the entire, conflict of this entire film. But his character is so complex because, yes, he's doing all these things because he thinks it's right, and he's not necessarily, this evil person, but he will do whatever he has to do, almost whatever he has to do, in order to do what he thinks is morally right. And what he thinks is morally right is to create the Celestial, so this Celestial can go on and create billions and billions of more planets and billions more lives in the galaxy, in the universe. So is that worth, one planet? He has not made connections with any humans in, on Earth, but he has made a connection to, Gemma Chan's character. And so you have that dynamic between those two characters and that conflict and that love that they had for each other over thousands of years, and whether or not Ikaris can, do what he has to do and kill Sersi at the end of this movie in order to get to what he thinks is morally right. But his decision to not do that kind of makes him rethink everything that he has done up until this point. And so when he does go ahead and fly into the sun, I was kind of bummed about that, because I thought his character has so much depth, and I love Richard Madden as an actor. And of course, you have the Stark brothers reunion in this movie with Kit Harington and Richard Madden, which I love that aspect of it. You have even Gemma Chan's name is Sersi in this movie, which is another kind of reference or kind of like coincidence with Game of Thrones. But having all that dynamic between those three characters was really interesting to me, and I think they were some of the strongest characters in the movie. And in terms of other characters, I absolutely loved Kumail Nanjiani in this movie as his character. I think his powers was also really, really cool, and just his entire side plot of him, having this valet character that's kind of following him around throughout the entire movie. He's, trying to make a documentary about the Eternals because he wants to, I guess share it with the world, because he's lived for, thousands of years, and he's been an actor on Earth in Bollywood, and has become like this empire of a generational, actor, like his grandfather, his great-grandfather, even though it was all him the entire time. I thought his character really worked for me in this movie. And I think when it comes to negatives of this movie, it is kind of that tonal shift of, when you have a Chloe Zhao movie versus you have, a Marvel-y type of humor movie. And I think Kumail Nanjiani, in terms of the humor, he really works for it at times. Sometimes it does feel very Marvel-y, and it doesn't fit in tonally with the rest of this movie, because when this movie is, dealing with that more philosophical debates about, these different morality choices, that is when this movie works best. That is a tone that works best for me. When it's kind of goofy, it works less for me, but he had some of the best jokes in this movie nonetheless. Same thing with Brian Tyree Henry as Phastos. He was also a really great character. I loved his family aspect that he has, that's this connection that he has to humanity. I love all of that stuff, and I thought his character was also very funny. I thought his humor worked for the most part as well. I already did touch on Barry Keoghan's DRUIG character, but also his sort of love interest character, played by Lauren Ridloff, who is in The Walking Dead now, and I really like her as an actress. And yes, she is a deaf actress, so it's nice to have that representation in this movie. But I do really like that dynamic that they had. Even though there were kind of lesser characters in this movie in terms of screen time, I thought that dynamic worked really well, and she was a badass with her speed powers, and fighting Ikaris was really, really entertaining to watch in that third act. I wish I was confident enough to pronounce this guy's name, but he plays the character of Gilgamesh, and he was in Train to Busan. He was also a great presence in this movie. He had one moment where, once he found out that Salma Hayek's character had died, he's, holding this pie, and the pie slides off the pan. I know it's supposed to be like a, very emotional moment for that character, but my gosh, I was dying laughing. That was one of my favorite jokes in the entire movie. But I also loved his character and his relationship with, Angelina Jolie's character. In terms of characters, I think she had the most emotional depth in this movie, even though I think at times it doesn't work, because I don't think enough screen time was dedicated to her story to really care. She had this aspect where every once in a while she would kind of turn and try to kill the rest of the Eternals, and that storyline wasn't fleshed out enough. I still don't exactly know. It's some sort of thing that happens to them with, their memories being erased, and, she's getting those memories back, and it's kind of like her programming turning on her at some point that's actually trying to tell the truth. And so there's that whole aspect of her character that just doesn't I feel like I'm still confused about it. I feel like it wasn't fleshed out enough in this movie, but her relationship with Gilgamesh was strong, and once, Gilgamesh dies in the movie by the Deviant, that fight between her and the Deviant at the end of this movie is entertaining to watch, although, again, I don't think the Deviant has too many great motivations. Yes, he's kind of a good guy, but he also can't live because he'll absorb the powers, and so I wish that villain had some more depth, like Richard Madden's character had. And last but not least with characters, I have Lia McHugh as Sprite, and her character was probably my least favorite of the entire ensemble. I think I liked all the dynamics between all the characters, but her motivations I thought was a little iffy because she has this sort of love for Ikaris's character, and she's stuck in a young girl's body, and so and she's living that way for eternity. She can never grow up, and so she has this aspect where I think Barry Keoghan's character compares her to Tinker Bell and Peter Pan, and so that whole aspect of it, I thought her motivations were okay. When she betrays the team, I just didn't think that was earned at that moment. I was confused as to why she left. At first, I was like, why is she going with, maybe she's going to turn on him and it's this whole thing. But no, it never was that. That was just what she wanted to do. She wanted to betray her team to be with, Ikaris. But I could understand Ikaris's, dynamic of why he was doing the things he was doing. I just couldn't understand her reasoning of going with him. And so that aspect didn't really work for me. I'm glad that she's able to age now. She was turned into a human at the end of this movie, and so she did get her full arc in this movie. I just don't think it felt earned when she betrayed the team. And yes, this movie is absurdly long. It's 2 hours and I think 47 minutes, but it actually isn't that long because, you have a long sort of credit sequence and you have the 2 after credit sequences. And so the movie feels like it is a long movie. It doesn't feel as long as, say, like Dune. I feel like Dune felt longer, but what this movie didn't have is it didn't have that epic scale that I think Marvel has been saying this is their new epic superhero movie, and it doesn't feel that way. Dune had an epic scope and feel to the film, and I absolutely loved that movie's, take on it. And this movie just doesn't feel as epic as I think Marvel thinks it is. And I think that is what my main complaint about this movie is. The score for this movie is really weak. I honestly don't have a single memorable track from any of the score throughout this entire movie, and it just didn't lift me up. It didn't pump me up in those action sequences. And yes, I do hear some complaints about the CGI, and I think yes, at times it is more noticeable considering that they went to a lot of, actual locations in this film, which I appreciate. I hope Marvel does more of that, because when you have the green screen scenes in this movie where they are not on location, you can tell. I think it's just absurdly obvious when they're on location in real places in these gorgeous landscapes versus, on a green screen set with fake landscapes. You can just tell when those things are put next to each other. And so I think that is the dynamic between, CGI and the actual in-camera stuff that I think people are having issues with. And I think other movies like Dune does a great job at melding those two things together. I think this movie struggles a little bit with that, but I didn't really care about that because I really cared about the characters of this movie. But when you have those action sequences, yes, they feel a lot more Marvel-y than the rest of the movie. And so tonally, again, I think there's 3 different dynamics. You have the Chloe Zhao movie, you have the Marvel action movie, and then you have the Marvel-y like comedic moments in this movie. I think those 3 tones sometimes conflict with each other, sometimes work really well. I just think it needs more time to like kind of meld together. I think they needed to try to meld those 3 things together a little bit better, and I hope they do that in the next film. And also, this movie was a lot more grounded to Earth than I was expecting it to be. I was expecting it to be a lot more cosmic than it was, and I love the moment when that Celestial at the end of the movie comes and you see him like floating above Earth, and it's really terrifying. It's really just daunting to see that, and it gives me hope that they are going to go that Galactus route eventually, and you will see an actual real Galactus, unlike Silver Surfer, that Fantastic Four movie. And this movie actually has sort of like bits and pieces of Silver Surfer in it, like, oh, we all need to form together into like one mind, and that's what the Rise of the Silver Surfer movie did as well. We need to combine all our powers, and there are weird connections between this movie and the Rise of the Silver Surfer movie, which is just a strange observation. But by no means do I think this is a bad movie. I think it's an entertaining movie. I think the pacing of this movie, even though it is a longer movie, the pacing is all consistent. It is consistently the same pace throughout the entire movie. I just do think you could have trimmed it a little more to have this movie have a more visceral pace and to have, those more epic moments land a little bit harder because of those things. But it's kind of a give or take because the character stuff in this movie and that philosophy is my favorite part of it, but I do wish it just kind of had a slightly faster pace. And I think there was a middle ground to find in this, but it is undoubtedly a Chloe Zhao movie. Obviously, I have my Nomadland poster up here. I did not like Nomadland because it's just not my type of movie. I was not the audience for that movie. It was very well made, very well directed, but it kind of bored me. And I can see this movie not being for everybody in terms of the Marvel fandom, because yes, I love all that philosophical debates and the sci-fi aspects of this that are, comparable to Dune, say, but in terms of the action type movie. This is the first Marvel movie that I wouldn't call an action movie. I would call it a drama first and then an action movie. And so I quite don't know where I would rank this in terms of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. One day I'll do another ranking video of all the MCU movies. I did that once before. So that is my review for Eternals. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys comment down below what you guys thought of Eternals and the cast and all those different things. Also, the after credit scene. I forgot to talk about that. Harry Styles as Eros. Honestly, I really liked it. The little Pip, troll thing, terrible. I don't know what that was. What was I don't know what that was. But Harry Styles as Eros, this, charismatic character, when he walks in, his presence is felt immediately, and I don't really know his full backstory. I know he's a brother of Thanos, and I know he is somewhat of an Eternal. He's considered an Eternal, but he's not, as powerful as an Eternal, because there's, he's, half Eternal. I don't know. There's something about it. I'm sure you guys can comment down below and tell me all the things about him, but his presence and his charismatic, character tone that he had in this movie. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he is going to do in the future of the movies. And of course, you have Kit Harington as a Black Knight character in the other after credit scene. But yes, those are my thoughts on the movie. Finally, thanks guys for watching this video. A little bit longer for this really long movie. But thanks guys for watching. I hope to see you all in my next one.